Hello there, Lodro.
Hello, how wonderful to be here with you.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. It's a great honor to have you here. Would it be okay if I just start with sharing your amazing biography?
Sure, go for it. I'll just
Okay.
you're embarrassed.
Ah. Lodro Rinzler is a meditation teacher and the author of 7 books, amazing, as well as the co-founder of MNDFL Mindful Meditation Studios in New York City. His books, Walk Like a Buddha and The Buddha Walks into the Office, both have received Independent Publisher Book Awards. Lodro has taught meditation for 20 years in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition and travels frequently for his books, having spoken across the world at conferences, universities, and businesses as diverse as Google, Harvard University, and the White House. Named one of 50 innovators shaping the future of wellness by Sonoma, Rinzler's work has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic, Good Morning America, CBS, and NBC. Wow, amazing.
Thanks so much for having me as a part of this grouping. Wonderful to be here with you. I appreciate the chance to chat.
Oh, thank you so much. How is your day going so far?
That's quite lovely. Thank you. And yours?
Good. Yeah, it's been so wonderful. We had 3 speakers before this, and just everyone is just sharing so much light and so much wisdom. It's just wonderful to talk about this topic, and it's been wonderful. Yeah. So may I ask, how has your life journey been so far? Can you tell us a bit about your overall life experience?
Sure. It's a mixed bag, but I mean, who
Yeah.
otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And I think, from my perspective, it's I've always joked in the intros to my books that if there's anything that I can offer in the various books that I've written, it's because I've studied with a lot of incredible wisdom teachers and taken in a fraction of what they've offered me.
Yeah.
And then B, just as likely that if there is a mistake to be made on the spiritual path, I've done it and I've learned from it. And that's the sort of 2 ways I think we learn. We sort of have received the understanding of what we might want to do. And then we either do that thing or we don't do that thing, and we learn from that thing and we continue to evolve as humans. So for me, just to finger paint a little bit of my own background, I was born and raised in a Buddhist household in New York City. So my parents had been meditating for many years before I even got around. Yeah. But the element of meditation being sort of soaked into the environment always made it so that it wasn't particularly weird or odd for us to do it. So when it comes to sort of fast forward to today, I think the main distinction that comes to mind is that it was a time where I like to joke that this wasn't the only reason that bullies pushed me into lockers, but it didn't help that I meditated. Right. It was considered weird back then. Yeah. And now it's just hit this tipping point in the mainstream where we're saying, everyone wants to meditate. Everyone's curious about it, or at least everyone thinks that they want to meditate until they give it a try and they say, this is hard. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I have other things. So having been born and raised in that environment of New York City, I started attending meditation retreats when I was in my early sort of preteens, and then started doing longer retreats in my later teenage years, spending some time at a monastery just temporarily, which is not uncommon in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition to sort of try out the monastic thing. And I came back and I went to the opposite extreme and did keg stands at college. And, I continued to practice throughout all of that and would spend those sort of summer vacations going on longer and longer retreats and studying with various teachers, and served as the director of a number of Buddhist nonprofits, and ultimately started my own nonprofit along the way. Started, as you noted, mindful meditation studios that, of course, closed down during the pandemic just because it was not very in vogue to want to sit in a small room and breathe on each other. But, they continue on. And I myself moved upstate, about 2.5 years ago, and 3 years ago. Anyway, I've been here for a while and handed the reins off for Mindful and have continued to write my books and to continue to teach primarily online during this pandemic.
Yeah. May I ask, I'm from upstate New York originally, near Saratoga.
Yeah, I'm outside of Albany, so not too far. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's very similar area. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Wonderful. It's so beautiful there, especially in the summertime. And yeah. So would it be okay to ask about the intersection perhaps of self-love and meditation?
Yeah, it's a great question, really. I mean, I think many of us have a not so great relationship to ourselves. And the work that you're doing obviously highlights that relationship very clearly. And it's interesting because I think most people, when they realize that they have some form of self-aggression toward themselves, they think it's just them.
Yeah.
It can actually be very isolating and it makes us feel very lonely. It's like something's wrong with me. Yes. And we don't realize that just about everyone's walking around going, my friend Megan Watterson is a Christian theologian and author, and she has a wonderful term that she uses, which is inner bitch radio. Excuse my language.
Oh, but I love that. So true.
It's like this like little radio channel going like, you jerk, why did you say that thing? I can't believe you just swore. You don't know, like, and so on and so forth. Whatever your version of that may be. Yeah. It's like this little voice saying, oh, why did you spend money on that instead of this? Why did you say this instead of that? Mm-hmm. All of these little things.
Yes.
It's, in Buddhism, we would call this the trap of doubt. Mm-hmm. That essentially what we have is either a relationship to our innate wakefulness, our innate, we would say Buddha nature, the seed of peace and calm and awake that we all have within us. Yeah. And we either have an experience of feeling grounded, whole, complete as is, mm-hmm. or we fall into what is known as the trap of doubt, meaning that we start to doubt that that is who we are. Yeah. And I think many of us have sort of basically lived in the realm of the trap of doubt for decades, if not longer. The idea being that we grew up in a society that maybe we were born with the idea of like, I'm basically whole and complete. But somewhere along the line, someone said something that says, oh, you shouldn't act that way, or you shouldn't do that thing. And then we end up in the realm of questioning ourselves, doubting ourselves. And it doesn't help that we live in a society that basically, it's a capitalistic consumer society that says, well, if you really wanted to fix yourself, you should just do this. You should get the better education, the better job, the perfect house, the new eye product, and then you'll be happy. Yeah. And then, however many versions of your eye product later, you say, I'm still not happy. What's happening? Yeah. And that's ultimately how a lot of people end up on my doorstep saying, well, I've tried everything else. Why don't I try meditation? Yeah. The beautiful, to answer your question a little bit more directly, the beautiful thing about meditation is that it actually allows us to form a different relationship to ourselves. Mm. These days, mindfulness of the breath, and it has many names, Zazen, Shamatha, any number of things. Just being mindful of the body breathing is such a foundational, wonderful practice where we are in an upright, uplifted, relaxed posture. We notice the body breathing. And then this thing happens to everyone. We drift off. Mm-hmm. What happens in that moment? Do we say, oh my God, you jerk? Why everyone else is sitting here perfectly peaceful? You're the one that's getting this wrong. Or do we say, no, it's okay. Mm-hmm. This is what happens in meditation. This is happening to everyone else. So we drift off, we come back again. That's the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And that choice between either perpetuating self-aggression or actually treating ourselves with unbelievable kindness and respect, that's the distinction that is constantly being practiced in meditation. Most of us drift off dozens, if not hundreds of times in a meditation session. And every time we could either choose to reaffirm the neural pathways that are basically self-aggressive. Yeah. Oh, you jerk, why are you like this? Mm-hmm. Or choose a new one, which is a little bit of kindness toward ourselves. Yeah. And that kindness ultimately grows into love. So the Tibetan word, or a Tibetan word for meditation is Gom, Gom. We can translate as meditation, can also translate as become familiar with or familiarization. Mm-hmm. And the idea here is that meditation is just a process of us getting to know ourselves better, to become more familiar with ourselves. Recently, we had a barbecue here, and there are some friends that were newer, and they came and we got to know them better. Yeah. And then we stayed in touch and we continued to see them, and we're seeing them more regularly. And at a certain point we say, oh, these are friends of ours now. Yeah. And then maybe years pass, who knows how long, but I look over my shoulder and say, I love my friends. Mm-hmm. Right. it's this gradual getting to, like, the more time we spend with them, the more curious and open we are in that relationship, the more love is just ultimately entering into that equation. Mm-hmm. So instead of saying, hey, I don't like you, friends, because you didn't do exactly what I wanted you to do. That's not how we treat our friends, but to treat our mind in that way in meditation, to start to say, oh, I'm just going to spend time with myself regularly. I'll sit down with myself and do this practice for 10, 15 minutes a day. And the more time I spend, the more opportunity I have to become gently curious, get to know, and ultimately down the road, love myself more.
Yeah. Yeah. May I ask about your own relationship with yourself and self-love? What has your journey been with that?
Sure. I mean, the interesting thing about, in my experience, is that I've never not meditated, right? I mean, like, I started meditating when I was 6. Wow. So it's a situation where the closest, like, the other control group is I have a half brother. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to pick on him, but I sort of look at that sometimes and say, I wonder if I would exhibit sort of anxiety in the same way. I wonder if I would have some of these other things happen if I had not been meditating for all these years. And so I don't know anything other than it, but I will say, to answer your question, in my own relationship, it's still evolving. As I said, it's constantly changing. I noticed the other day, I started working out more regularly in recent years. And I looked at my body and I said, oh, I could address my relationship with my body more. I feel more capacity to do it than I have. That's interesting. It's just another form of self-love. Yeah. We might value certain things about ourselves, but then sort of ignore our relationship with other things. Right. And it's just constantly saying, where have my love not yet reached? Yes. And to have that gentle curiosity about our relationship to ourselves is really important. Yes. I can say, oh, I feel a little self-conscious about some aspect of my body and still love myself. Yes. In the same way, it's like I can, be annoyed that my wife leaves the dishes in the sink and still absolutely love her. Right. Like, those do not have to go in. Yes. So it's sort of like that in my experience in my own relationship. Yeah. This ever unfolding, blossoming of our relationship to ourselves and to our bodies. And you mentioned some experiences as a child at school. What was the texture and flavor overall of your childhood experience? Yeah, I think I was an anxious child despite meditation. Again, it's like, how would I have ended up without it? Who knows? I have some ideas, but again, I'm not going to pick on my brother. But the idea here being, I could begin to, like, in my sort of formative years, or however you want to call it, it was against this backdrop I sort of alluded to before. There's the trap of doubt, and then there's what one might call basic goodness. Mm-hmm. And in the Buddhist tradition, this idea is basic isn't sort of like basic in the way that's been used in recent years to say not uncouth. It's more of a sense of like fundamental, foundational, primordial, innate, inherent. And then goodness is not good versus bad, sort of Star Wars style, but a sense of wholeness, completeness as is. And it's said that the more we practice, the more we have a relationship to that. So again, I don't know exactly if I would have had the same relationship without meditation, but it certainly encouraged me. And then of course the household environment encouraged me to explore the notion that maybe I'm not basically messed up and maybe I'm basically okay. And on top of that, things can go wrong in life. There can be confusion, mistakes can be made. All of these things can also happen. So I think it's interesting in terms of our relationship with self-love, what view do we hold? Do we hold the view of I'm basically messed up and I'm in need of fixing, or I'm basically whole and sometimes things go wrong? Because it is a huge difference in terms of how we end up treating ourselves. Yes, that is such a great distinction you're making. And it does seem that often the programming is the former, that there's something wrong with me. I need to be fixed. I need to do something on the external. I need to buy something. I need to achieve something in order to fix myself and be loved. And the latter viewpoint of all is well. I'm a perfect divine being at this point, at any point. And then I'm moving through my life's adventure with different experiences and griefs and joys. So much of what we've talked about
over the past few days in this virtual retreat is about the human experience, and I guess somewhat bringing enlightenment into the human experience, and holding all of it, being these vessels of expansion, holding all the griefs and all the joys. And I'm wondering what your take on all that is.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it is, from the Buddhist point of view, enlightenment is just who we are.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I had the wherewithal to ask my parents, like all of my Christian friends have this sort of origin story and so on and so forth. What is the Buddhist version? And they said very wisely that there was basic goodness and then it second guessed itself. Which is true. I mean, that's sort of the idea here, that we are inherently whole, complete as is. And then we second guess ourselves. And it's that example that I was saying before, where it's like, I don't have children of my own. I have a lot of godchildren. In my relationship with them, I noticed that there's this switch at a certain age. It's always sad to see where all of a sudden they start questioning themselves and questioning certain decisions. But before that happens, there's just openness.
Yes.
We have a new dog here who's currently mercifully sleeping. And yet, I always joke that she just has not yet encountered in her 5 months of life that anyone would dislike her.
Yes.
So it's a real interesting attitude where she just runs right up to people and is like, I love you already. And that's enlightenment. That's who we already are. The sense of openness, awakeness, just a willingness to completely engage and see reality for what it is, as opposed to filtering it through our fear, our anxiety, through our neurosis.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes. I so resonate with what you're sharing. And as a mom, it's been a bit heartrending to see what you've just described, that earlier openness, open-heartedness, faith, trust. And then socialization kind of comes in and the consciousness shifts a bit. And it seems like a lot of us, if we might call it awakening or whatever we term it, is coming back to that innocent self, coming back to open-heartedness.
That's exactly right. It's just this sort of remembering, we could say.
Yeah.
It's not something we go out and get. Like, we don't buy enlightenment over at the local Walmart. It's here. Yeah. It's remembering that is who we are.
Yes.
It's said that, 2,600 years ago, the Buddha got up, having attained enlightenment, and walked to the nearby stream and said, I'm going to renounce all my worldly stuff here. And he took his one begging bowl and he threw it in the stream. And it said that it literally went up against the current of the stream. And it was sort of this interesting moment where the Buddha realized that everything he taught was going to go against the stream of society. And everything I mentioned before about the sort of water we swim in, where we are told from an early age, you're not good enough, you need fixing. From, the ads served to us, to the movies that we watch and who is celebrated as celebrity, to, the articles about people who have all this money. It's sort of like, well, you should try and be that instead of who you are.
Yes.
And there's this undercurrent that we need to sort of cut against and say, well, that's actually not how I define success.
Yes.
That's not how I define meaning in my life.
Yes.
And if we can actually start to find what is meaningful for us, as opposed to what we've been told we should find meaningful,
yes,
then we might have a good chance of achieving some real sense of happiness, or as we could say, waking up.
Yes. Isn't that beautiful? Wouldn't that be a beautiful exercise for even kids at school to ask them, what is your definition of success? What is meaningful to you? And honoring that and having them connect with that. Recently, I've been really grappling with this topic. And for me, it just came down to just peace, inner peace, alignment, that I'm showing up as best as I can, that I'm living in integrity. And then whatever actually happens on the external world, of course, my human has its desires and preferences, but cultivating that just peaceful space within me, that I'm doing the best I can and I'm showing up as best I can and having peace with that, to me, is success.
Yeah, I love that. And that element of when you put it in that context, it's not dependent on external factors.
Yes.
And this is something I often talk about with people around, and this is a fine line in the sand I'm drawing. I completely understand here, but the distinction between intentions and goals. So particularly, in a new year, when people say, oh, I've got this New Year's resolution. And I'm always curious to hear about them because sometimes they are something very open-ended and they're an intention. I want to be kinder this year. I want to have more of a relationship to the present moment, any of these things.
Yes.
Which is different than saying I want to lose 20 pounds. Because here's what happens when we set a very specific goal. We either hit it or we don't. Those are the two options. We hit it and we say, that was fast. I should have said 30. And maybe I should keep striving for more.
Right.
Or we don't. And we say, well, here's a good opportunity for me to perpetuate self-aggression.
Yeah, right.
So I think Buddhists often get a bad rep for saying, oh, if you're always present, how can you plan for the future? It's not like that. First of all, we were always present. That'd be a great problem to have. There's an old line on the television show Friends where Chandler said, it's like having my wallet be too small for my 50s and my diamond shoes are too tight. It's sort of like that type of problem. But here we're saying, if we're more present, we can actually learn to be with what things are as opposed to our ideas of them and act more skillfully as a result. Yes. So to be really present and then to begin to actually start to look towards the future and say, what do I aspire to in an open-ended way, as opposed to boxing ourselves in and say, if it doesn't look exactly like this, then I'm not successful or this isn't meaningful.
Yes. We've been talking about this orientation so much over the few days here. This idea of my smaller self, my human, my ego, of course, has its own ideas and preferences, but my soul and the universe flowing through me has a much bigger plan for me. And just, I like this phrase, the not knowing mind. I'm trying to really honor that and just be in alignment and the guidance comes in, but my human doesn't really know the full plan.
Yeah. There's that element to sort of getting out of our own way.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the idea of, okay, I might have an idea about how I'd like things to go, but this or something better, whatever the universe has in store for me, surrendering and being humble to that. And I'm really curious to ask you, and I just so appreciate this beautiful conversation. Thank you so much. This idea of open-heartedness, and what we might sometimes be met with in our reality when we are open-hearted. We might not always be met with open-heartedness, or we might open ourselves to a partner and end up feeling very hurt, and maybe the partnership dissolves. And but to me, at least, I'm showing up in the best way that I can, or what feels highest and best to me. I'm giving it a shot. I'm not closing down. And I'm willing to accept that I might be hurt, but that's less painful to me than closing myself off to life.
Yeah. And that's a lovely way of putting it. I think many people come from the perspective of that sounds really rough, and I would rather actually not be fully present and not fully engage and sort of keep myself safe. And at the same time, as you very well know in your work, that that keeps us small. That keeps us incredibly removed from possibility, we could say.
Right.
So I think this is a very common experience for many of us. It's a little bit like if we have at some point put our heart on the table and someone comes around with a very big mallet and just sort of smashes it.
Yes.
Our initial instinct, not surprisingly, is to grab it and sort of, put it back in.
Yeah.
And that's normal. But at a certain point, again, I'm just speaking from a Buddhist perspective, it said that we are innately loving beings.
Yeah.
That's who we are. So we naturally long to love. Like it just, no matter how much armor we put up, at some point it gets worn away again. And we find that tenderness of heart. So it's just a natural state for us to want to do that. Now, there's a term that we use, which is cocoon, that we start telling ourselves all sorts of stories. Well, they would only like me for these reasons if they only knew that about me, so on and so forth. And what I'm doing here is I'm just spinning out all these threads, thread after thread after thread. And the more of these stories that I tell myself, the more there is a cocoon that is literally blocking me from being with other people as they are, as I am.
Yes.
And that is really hard to untangle, which is why, invite the meditation teacher on, and every solution to meditation problem. But, it is sort of like, this is what meditation does. The moment I mentioned before, we notice that we drift off, we sort of cut that thought, we come back to the breath over and over again.
Yeah.
In a relaxed manner. That's cutting through the layers of the cocoon. It's like we're just taking a scissor to it.
Yeah.
The more we meditate, it's sort of like the more we put a jackhammer with a Brillo pad on it and put it right at the heart center of that armor and cocoon that we've built up, and we just sort of rub away until all of a sudden there's the real opening that happens.
Yeah.
And we're just more open, vulnerable, raw hearts, which I think is, as you said, scary for many people. Is this element of, but what if I get hurt again? That's the nature of life. We will always get hurt again in different ways.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time with colleagues figuring out the ways that we could get the least hurt. And it's not great. It's like you have one plane where you board and you forget your cell phone at home, and then they have their plane that they board without their cell phones, and they both happen to hit a mountain and go down immediately. No one suffers very long, and no one has to mourn anyone.
Yeah.
That's basically, because otherwise anything other than that, essentially we are all sort of constantly falling in love and mourning and all of sort of, it's just part of being human.
Yes.
We want to spare ourselves any pain. We were sort of, we're in the wrong industry being humans.
Right.
It's just part of life. I mean, again, I don't mean to be too Buddhist about these things, and that's why we get a bad rep, because all I'm doing is talk about the suffering element. But, the love that we have comes with the idea that the love that we have will end at some point. It will either, I'd like to think that my wife and I will grow old together, but then we talk about which one of us gets to go first.
Right.
And so that the other one doesn't have to mourn after that. I think that'd be very hard. Or, that's the best case scenario. Maybe she leaves me in a week. I have no idea. Like, this is just the nature of these things. When you fall in love.
Yes. We fall in love, and our heart in a way is somewhat outside of ourselves. It's who knows what may happen. But then to close it off doesn't seem like the right path either. So we humble ourselves, we surrender ourselves to whatever the experience that will come.
Yeah, to the best of our ability. And then, of course, we start to tell ourselves stories, and we say, oh, this person always does this, and so on and so on. And those are other forms of that cocoon that I was talking about earlier, that we are starting to separate ourselves from who this person is, because we have so many ideas of who we think they are. And that is another form of pain that we sort of inflict on ourselves.
Yes. And perhaps rationalizations of trying to get through our pain. Well, they're like this, and that's why I feel pain. And just this orientation of just sitting with whatever is arising within you without rationalizations and trying to distract or numb ourselves, but the sitting with it. I often tell the people I work with that it really only takes about 60 seconds to feel a feeling. And it seems like a lot of our society is built upon not feeling, right? To distract us, to numb us out. Feeling the feelings, really.
Yeah, there's a wonderful pith slogan from, I think some people here might have actually heard of this teacher before. It's someone I've studied with in the past, Pema Chodron. And she has a wonderful pith instruction, which is to feel the feelings, drop the stories. So I've been focusing a lot on that first and the second element of, dropping the stories. Like, it's one thing to say, I'm angry at so-and-so. And to feel that feeling, to be with it. I'll come back to the feel of the feelings in a moment, but what we often do is we say, and here's why, and here's what I'm going to say to them. And I'm just going to text them this thing right now. And then we're only perpetuating that.
Yes.
To feel the feelings, an analogy that comes to mind is a little bit like if we're outside by a campfire.
Yeah.
And if we're just standing there, holding our hands to the warmth of the fire, we're feeling it.
Yes.
But we're not adding to it. We're not making it more than it needs to be. What happens when we do that? At some point, the fire goes out. Mm-hmm. It's just what fires do.
Yeah.
And same thing with emotions. If we feel it, it will just sort of move through us.
Yes.
Here's what we often do, though. We say, I'm going to send an email about this. And I'm going to prove how I'm right and they're wrong. And that is like getting a tank of gasoline, walking up to that fire and just starting to pour it on.
Yes.
It's just keeping it going and going and going.
Absolutely. We may talk about our feelings a lot, but we sometimes don't actually feel them. And it's amazing. I'm a therapist. I went through years and years of training. And I'll be honest, never in any of my clinical training was it mentioned to help clients feel their feelings. And that just kind of blows my mind. I really learned about feeling one's feelings after all of the training. There's a lot of talking about feelings, but not necessarily really. And I think I think some of us didn't even know how to feel our feelings. We were so taught to not feel our feelings as kids, to turn away from that. I think especially men, but women too. So I know even just for myself, it's been a bit of a journey to really learn how to feel my feelings.
Yeah. And I love that. And I'm with you on it. And I think it's a continual exploration. I think when I first got together with my wife, there was still a lot of fear around anger in particular, that I was allowed to feel angry.
Right.
And to communicate that, not have it be a big deal.
Right.
And, I think that's, again, it's what I just articulated is better than what often was happening before, which is tamp it down, become very cold, sort of try and work it out on my own, not talk about it. But now it's a situation where we sort of, and I think this is just a very normal thing for couples, where in the first year or so, we had to learn how to sort of fight. How to have disagreements,
right?
Which have served us for the remaining 6, and 6 years. So it's just one of those things where it's like, I know I can express, hey, I was really frustrated when X, Y, and Z happened. Just, okay, great. And it doesn't have to become more than that.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a conflict, and vice versa,
I'm so glad you're sharing that we tend to demonize certain emotions or feelings like anger, like there's something wrong with that feeling arising. Yeah. And I like to just term it as some are more uncomfortable. Some feelings can feel more uncomfortable, but mostly because we're socialized to think there's something wrong with them. And some feelings can feel more comfortable, but I agree. I'm still learning to be okay with feeling angry. As a girl growing up, that was not okay. It was not okay to be angry. Yeah.
Yeah. I can only imagine. And I think you named it. And part of what I'm trying to point out with the fire analogy here is there's a distinction between saying, I'm angry and I can communicate it in a skillful way, and I can sort of sit with it and learn to be with the emotion, as opposed to tamp it down.
Yes.
Try and distract myself by running away and watching Netflix, downloading Tinder, buying things online, whatever version, having a drink, having drugs, whatever it might be.
Yes.
Or acting out. And that's the other, the example I gave before. I'm going to text them, I'm going to email them.
Yes.
Like, to not have to do something about the emotion. Actually learn to be okay with ourselves, which again, coming into our topic today, is a form of self-love.
Absolutely.
To not beat ourselves up for feeling what we feel, give ourselves space to do it, and at the same time, know that it doesn't make us bad to feel these things.
Absolutely. I love the word honor, to just honor whatever is arising within us, and to trust, and to not judge. Anger. I'm not allowed to feel anger. That's not okay. I'm a spiritual person. A spiritual person doesn't feel anger. But just to open space, hold space for oneself. We talk a lot about holding space for others, which is beautiful. But this idea of holding space for ourselves and whatever is arising is such a beautiful practice. Just I like to say, like being your God self to yourself, this unconditional acceptance of whatever is arising within you.
Love that.
And just the peace that one feels, because otherwise I think it really can feel like an internal war. There's anger there. I'm not going to allow myself to feel it. Well, it's still there. And it feels like emotions really want to be acknowledged, there's some energetic aspect of it. Please acknowledge me. Please acknowledge me. And then I will flow through you, and it'll be integrated. And I always find, I'm curious how you feel about this, that the most uncomfortable feelings, when we really have the courage to go into them, they're portals. There's usually something really, a sacred gift on the other side of the most uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And because they're so scary, we don't often think of them as opportunities.
Yes.
There's a beautiful line in a poem by the Tibetan Buddhist teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, where he opens it by saying, "In the garden of gentle sanity, may you be bombarded by coconuts of wakefulness." And I love that because it's very visceral, and immediately you're sort of going about your day-to-day life. And we all have moments where we are thrown for a loop. But the idea here is this isn't even like a gentle, like an acorn hitting your head saying, "Hey, wake up." It's a coconut. It knocks us to our knees. We curl up in a ball.
Yeah.
And we are in pain, and we want change and turmoil to go pick on someone else. And we don't know how to be with the emotion. So we sort of are like, I'm just going to numb out, essentially, or whatever our version of all of this may be. And then we could actually say, well, what if I use this instead of another opportunity to numb out or move away from the experience, but to lean into the experience? And then that is why it's a coconut of wakefulness, because it helps wake us up to the nature of what's actually going on in our life.
Yes.
And we can actually move through these things, as you said, sort of joining whatever comes up in some of the change and issues that arise as part of being human as the fodder for our spiritual journey.
Yes, that life itself is the guru. Life itself is the teacher. I know for so many years, I just went to workshop after workshop and training after training, and they were all amazing. But I have this orientation now that, and I still will do that time to time, but life is my teacher. I'm in a workshop right now with just whatever is coming into me, what is arising in me, what uncomfortableness maybe can I really have the courage to go into. We're all being met with our teacher every day, which is just life and what is coming up and what is arising in us. And it's free.
Right.
And it's there 24/7. You don't have to go travel anywhere to get these teachings. I think the most attractive, sexiest thing right now for me in others is the ability to feel everything. Mm-hmm. That to me is so amazing. And I love it. And it's what I want, always to do myself. And the more courageous I have been with feeling uncomfortable feelings, the more my life has actually really opened up and shifted. I would say it's been like the greatest blessing has been feeling uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a weird thing to say, but I'm reminded of this cartoon where it's a woman waiting in a long line, and she says, I know I'm supposed to be in the now, but can't it be another now? And that's basically what we do most of the time. We're like, yes, I want to join this with my spiritual path. That sounds, all the things that these two are saying sounds really good. I'm going to go out and do it. And then we get stuck in traffic on our way to our next thing. And we go, oh my God, these assholes, right? Like it's like we immediately default to, well, I should be now, but it should be another now. No, that's the perfect moment to work with that frustration, with that anger, to be with it, to learn to see it, to even engage in meditation if we are in bumper to bumper traffic or whatever it is. Yes. Like there's always opportunities to take our life as you said, sort of a lesson, but also just sort of something that we can address as the important thing of this moment.
Yes, exactly. What is life asking of me right now? How can I orient to this moment in full presence, in a full way of being? Where am I right now? Yeah.
It's a great question. I think even, in addition to some of we talked a little bit about mindfulness of the breath, which is such a good foundational practice that I recommend for everyone. We talked a little bit about mindfulness of emotions, which is such a important practice as we navigate these tricky times. And that's a very full and rich practice too. But even the element of contemplation that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
We might ask a question of ourselves and see what answers arise from within us.
Yes.
And something like that. Can you repeat the question that you just said? What is life asking of me?
What is life asking of me right now? Or
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
To sit with that question,
to
ask it, to see what answers emerge from inside of us, and then to ask it again and see if the answers change or if it's the same. And to do that even for a few minutes could be so powerful.
Yes. This, I just love the word humbleness. It's just humbleness to life. How am I meeting up with what life is bringing me? What are we doing here? Yeah. And it's so interesting because it's all just this unraveling, I feel, of most of what most of us have been taught, which is the opposite of all of this. It's to be much in our thinking mind and make plans and think that we control and we put our stamp on everything. And it's not very humble, that orientation.
It's true. Yeah. But it's exactly what we're taught. And I think that sense of, yes, it's humbling, but it's also sort of like if we are in the ocean, we're trying to fight against the crashing on us.
Yeah.
Like at some point we're like, this isn't the thing that makes sense. And I think people who are here with us today and in this fact and all of that, like, I think that is the thing that we often learn. It's like, well, we end up in a situation like, exploring different spiritual practices, different ways of being, because the struggling against the wave has not really been helpful so far.
Exactly.
But to relax into the life can be really enlightening. And I hate to interrupt our flow of the conversation, but I've just sort of been monitoring some of the comments that have come in. Someone asked if say more about the analogy.
Yes, the coconut. Yes.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say what the lines are again. And that is, in the garden of gentle sanity, may you be bombarded by coconuts of wakefulness. So as we go about the sense of our day-to-day existence, and there is some gentle sanity. I have my morning coffee and my wife comes down and we have some time with the animals. And then I take one dog out, she takes the other dog out. And it's sort of like, we have our flow. But then if someone calls us and says, your mother is in the hospital, right? That is a coconut hitting me. And I can shut down, I can numb out, I can spin, I can become very anxious, or I can be with the situation and use this as a moment to wake up and to say, okay, and now here is, as we were just saying, this is what life is presenting to me. Yes. This is what life is asking of me to address. And here I am for it. There's a real bravery, I think, in these conversations that we're having, but also the inspiration of what we're asking people to do and what we're trying to do ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. A real bravery in just really showing up for what life is bringing us and not numbing out and not suppressing and not distracting and just meeting it. And there might be pain, there might be joy. Who knows? We don't know. I love the Sufi poet Rumi so much. His poem, The Guest House. Whatever may arrive to your doorstep, whether it be a joy or a sorrow, we meet it with grace and welcoming. It is all a divine gift sent from the beyond. Something like that. I probably haven't quite said it quite right, but just this beautiful, idea of humbleness and curiosity. I love that orientation of curiosity as well. To me, that feels very light and not so serious about life. Like, all right, well, I'm going to be curious about how my human is going to interact with what is now being presented.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, I think I also mentioned earlier about sort of when we're in relationship with others. And that is the other idea, that curiosity can be a form of compassion. Yeah. That saying, here's who I think this person is. We say, who is this person today? Like, who are they? I know that, sure, I'll look at this dog. This dog is now 35 pounds. It used to be 15 pounds a few weeks ago. My God, like there's this constantly changing, evolving being.
Right.
And then you add in the complexity for a human. So we'll keep picking on my wife as the example, like this is a completely different human being that I met when we first met 10 years ago, whatever it was. Certainly from when I started to really get to know her when we were dating 7 years ago, it's certainly even from a year ago. Like there's just, if I have an idea of this person likes this type of ice cream and listens to this sort of music and all the other things that we do, and we lose the curiosity about them, they become completely different human beings than what we actually know them to be.
That's so true. I love that. I love that you've brought that up, that our thinking mind wants to make sense of the world and wants to put things in categories. So, okay, this person is in this box because then I can understand it and life won't feel so overwhelming. But I love what you've said, that all of us are continually evolving beings with just multiple expressions, really maybe infinite expressions of self, really. And honoring that in ourselves as well. Who would how would I like to express myself today?
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. And maybe just one last question around this. I'm just curious, you as this amazing meditation teacher and really very well renowned, do you ever feel, I don't know, some pressure to show up in a certain way because of the pedigree and all of that?
I think I certainly did for a long period of time. When I started teaching meditation, I was 18 and I was very young. And I thought I had to show up with all of the knowledge. And then as I mentioned, I started becoming like directors of nonprofit Buddhist places, and I was in my early 20s, so I put on suits and overdressed to sort of feel more adult.
Yeah.
And, sort of put on airs that I knew what I was doing. And gradually I kept looking at those things because, all of the context that I just started talking about, it's like it's baked into the spiritual practice. It's like that level of self-examination is important. And I do feel like I show up at this point as authentically as I can. So I lead a number of like meditation teacher trainings and things like that for people who want to become mindfulness instructors. And the advice I always give them is like, if you want to do quote unquote branding or anything like that, figure out like the good, bad, and ugly of who you are and present all of it. In the same way I often go with you. And I was like, what's the life story? Well, it's messy and it's, it's like there's absolute innate wisdom and there's also confusion that arises here and there. Like I'm not an infallible person. I'm not fully enlightened. It's just to be like really human about it.
Yes.
And that, has been really important to me, where I feel like it also enables me to talk and apply Buddhist principles to things that are not normally discussed because, there isn't anything that's sort of quote unquote off limits. Like people are welcome to show up in my online community as they are and to bring whatever is on the table right now. And we go from there. And I feel like it's gradually evolved and will probably continue to evolve as I do, to just sort of be like, okay, I'm going to present myself as genuinely as I can.
Yes.
And, I love that. Wants to stick around for that case.
Yes. I love that so much. And I think it makes everyone very relatable when this is a fellow human that has their challenges and their growth as well. And I love that. I love that you're showing up that way. That's beautiful. Lodro, what a delight to speak with you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's a real
so
honor.
much. Yeah, same. Just beautiful. Everything you've shared, so much wisdom, so much light. Where can people find out more about your amazing work?
Sure. The nice thing about having a name like Lodro Rinzler is that you get to own the domains and social media handles. So, LodroRinzler.com, or I'm rarely, but sometimes on Twitter and Facebook, but often on Instagram at Lodro Rinzler. And these days we're starting a new cycle of teachings on exactly what we were just talking about, Buddhism in everyday life, like how these teachings apply to like pandemic fatigue and connection with people who feel isolated, and working with difficult conversations that we all seem to be having around people who really see reality differently than us. So it's going to be a fun cycle, I think, of teaching. So that's sort of what my online community is currently engaged in.
That's amazing. And you said it's Buddhism in everyday life?
You got it.
That's amazing. How beautiful. That sounds fantastic. That's what we all need. Yeah, applying the spiritual to the human experience. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Such a delight to meet you. Such a delight to have you here for this hour. And just thank you so, so much. And
My absolute pleasure. And thank you for all of your hard work in organizing this.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a blast. It's just been a delight to talk to everybody. So I'm in my joy. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lodro.
Take good care.
Yeah, you too. Bye. Oh, what a delight. Oh my goodness.